up at Grand Prix Oakland. Again, he is a fantastic limited player. We'll see how good he is constructed, too, because we've got a very skill-intensive matchup here between two pod decks that can gain a whole bunch of life, they can deal a whole bunch of damage, and do a lot of things in the meantime. So we're going to be underway in round number 3. Neal's going to start off with a Rage of Urge Thicket and a Noble Hierarch.
Yeah, now both of these players are playing very, very similar Melira pod decks. There's only very, very minor differences, like Neal has a Thrun instead of a second Murderous Red Cap, and maybe, yeah, I mean, actually that might even be, no. Wallace has just 2 Voice of Resurgences, but there's almost no difference between the 2 decks.
Yeah, these are strikingly similar, actually. I'm taking a look at the one-ofs. They both have a one of Shriek Maul. They've both got, the same number of chords and Abrupticase and things of that nature. You see Oliver's going to sacrifice a fetch land here, go get an Overgrown Tomb, going to take some damage to do that. We'll see what his play is going to be. He has... Oh, he's got one of his singletons, one of the better ones in this matchup too, an Orzhov Pontiff. He's going to use that to take care of the birds, and mana acceleration in this matchup is huge.
Definitely. And additionally, the Orzhov Pontiff is a very powerful permanent to just be sitting in play, because as soon as Neal activates either Viscera Seer or Birthing Pod, he'll be able to kill the next mana accelerator that Wallace puts down.
So Wallace was relying on that Bird's Paradise because he draws and just passes the turn back. So Oliver is off to a fantastic start. He has the mana advantage. He's got the board advantage. He's going to try to look to expand on that. He's going to start first by attacking for 1, put Freemon down to 17. Let's see what the follow play is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, without even knowing Wallace's hand, I got to imagine that Neal's somewhere in the ballpark of a 90-something% favorite already. And from the looks of it, he has a Birthing Pod in hand, too.
He's going to play Eternal Witness, get back that Misty Rainforest. He'll sacrifice that. We'll see if he gets a basic. It will be a forest, a pretty nice-looking one as well, and play a Birds of Paradise and pass the turn back to Freemon, who just draws and has to pass the turn again.
Yeah, in this spot, Neal is just completely looking at okay, how can I play around everything?
Yep.
I don't want to be greedy because, again, this spot, he could try to combo off as fast as possible and likely win the game in 2 turns, but maybe there's a better way to present a powerful board. Like maybe he can just get as much value as possible so that he doesn't randomly lose to some strange thing, because at this spot, as long as he doesn't mess it up, he should this game should be a 1 game for him. Missing that land drop was huge.
See Oliver in his hand right now. He does have that Birthing Pod that Patrick mentioned. He also does have Voice of Resurgence and Gavany Township, so he can take the beatdown approach or he can take the podding approach, but the world right now is basically his oyster.
Yeah, I mean, there's no fooling anybody with what your deck is at this point. Neal Oliver is very clearly playing Melira Pod. What he doesn't know for sure, though, is what is Wallace Freemon playing. Razor Verge Thicket, Birds of Paradise suggests Melira Pod, but that could be a few different things,
Here's a Voice of Resurgence for Oliver. We'll see if he's going to follow up and play Pod or not. It looks like he has 2 Birthing Pods in his hand, so he's going to play the Pod. He'll pay the Phyrexian mana to do that, and Freeman's going to concede immediately, but...
Freemon showed the Viscera Seer at
yes.
the very end. Did you see that?
Yeah, you caught it just like I did.
Yeah.
Slammed his hand down a little bit of frustration, but by doing so, we don't know if Oliver caught it or not. We did. You guys did at home as well. Gave away a little bit of info.
Oh, Oliver's got a sharp eye. He's playing it off, not revealing, but he knows now.
Yeah, he's pouncing over to the sideboard. Neal Oliver does win game number 1. We'll take a look at the sideboards here. We're looking at, basically the same decks, but Patrick, I'll let you take a look at Freeman's first to begin and see what he can board in here.
Yeah, I mean, these, I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think these are both more or less Andrew Cuneo's, which is very similar to many of the Magic Online Melira Pod decks. But from the looks of it, their sideboards are completely identical. No, almost identical. It does look like Neal has 2 Slaughter Packs, where Freemon has a Slaughter Pact and a Path Exile.
Jeez.
But for the most part, the cards they're looking to bring in this matchup are like Harmonic Sliver, possibly Entomber Exarch. The real question, I think, though, is Thoughtseize good enough?
So, I know that one thing that we saw kind of around Pro Tour Return to Ravnica when Jund was huge. We saw Stanislav Sivka win that tournament, but Jund had, a real staying point in that tournament and then future tournaments as well. As a lot of the talk was, when you're playing against a mid-range deck, Thoughtseize's value goes down because it's such a bad top deck. It's so good in the early turns of the game, but so much worse when you're in an attrition battle. And this kind of feels the same way where, you're great on the opening turns of the game, maybe you nab a Birthing Pod, a Quarter Calling, what have you, but you're much worse once you get in the later parts of the game. So it's tough to say if you want Thoughtseize here.
Yeah, I got a feeling that game played out kind of strange, obviously, because Neal managed to mana screw Wallace, but I think the general trend we're going to see is whichever player gets to get their choice of their toolbox is going to have a big advantage. And so Birthing Pod in particular is just significantly better than most of the other cards in either player's deck. But that said, you can't Thoughtseize the top of somebody's deck.
This is true.
So my guess is just that it's a question of how many bad cards are in both of their decks. Like, for instance, I mean, is Abrupt Decay something you want? Probably not. You can cut Abrupt Decays, you can cut... actually, there's not a whole lot else you could cut. Maybe the Spellskite.
How good are, like, do you want 4 Finks as opposed to maybe 2?
Definitely. You can cut some number of Finks. I definitely think so. The Thoughtseize is, at least it's always a reasonable card early on. I mean, It's not a great top deck, but I personally, I think, I mean, now I definitely defer to these players who have surely played the pod decks quite a bit more recently, but my guess is we're going to see some amount of Thoughtseizing out of each of them.
One thing, too, to keep in mind, both players do have the main deck Linvala, Keeper of Silence, which plays a huge role in this matchup as well. So maybe they'll be chasing their pod chains to, be the first person to get there. Maybe they'll both have one in play. Who knows? One question I was going to ask you, though, is we do see these players finish up sideboarding here, and we'll start game 2 in a moment. Obviously, member of the Pantheon, getting ready for the previous Pro Tour. How much did you guys test this deck, or maybe how much did this deck figure into your preparation for the tournament?
Oh, tons. We expected Pod as a macro archetype to be one of the 3 most popular archetypes, which it proved to be. And we had people in the house, many people considering it. Andrew Cuneo ended up playing it.
Okay.
It's a fine deck. It's funny in that sometimes it feels like a combo deck, sometimes it feels like a rock deck, and sometimes it feels like a random collection of cards.
Yep.
But it's a fine deck. It was aimed at by a lot of people because it was one of the 2 most popular combo decks, and everybody knew it.
Sure.
And it's slightly overplayed on Magic Online compared to the real world as well, so it didn't really catch anybody by surprise. At the time, a lot of people were playing Kiki Pod. However, Melira Pod has proven the better of the 2 in general, as it is much better at being a backup plan deck. It's got better mana. It can play more fair cards like Abrupt Decay, Thoughtseize, and play a more, a normal game. Mm-hmm. Whereas Kiki Pod was much more, like, its birthing pods are incredible, but, kind of the rich get richer when you have birthing pod. Like, you don't need your birthing pod to be that much better.
This is a deck that, I know, coming into this tournament, this is one of the decks that people think of as just one of the top decks in the format, and I'm sure at the Pro Tour everyone was prepping to beat it. I think one of the things that gives this deck a huge advantage is that the fact that it's kind of a hard deck to prepare for, because there isn't one card that just kind of kiboshes the whole strategy.
You're talking about in terms of, like a hate card?
Yeah, there's a hate card that you can go to and say, you know what, enough of that, this deck is out of here. I don't want to lose this deck.
There's a lot of good hate cards against them, but none of them are stone cold killers like Rule of Law is against Storm or Stony Silence is against Affinity. Stony Silence is reasonably good in this matchup, being able to stop Earthing Pod, their best card by far. But they have lots of other things they can do, and they can get rid of it.
Yep.
And Shadow of Doubt and Avid Mind Sense are both excellent, but at the same time, they're excellent value. They don't win the game on the spot.
Yeah.
And Avid Mind Sensor can be, particularly devastating, but they have a lot of answers to it. Like that Orzhov Pontiff we saw, Murderous Redcap, even Court of Calling. Sometimes, like it's tricky because each Court of Calling only has a shot because you can only look at the top few cards. Mm-hmm. But you have chances to try to hit an Orzhov Pontiff, a Murderous Redcap, a blocker like Linvala or Revelark, an Abrupt Decay. If you actually just randomly draw it.
Yeah, the deck is very. I guess the word I'm looking for is. Sustainable is not the word. Resilient.
Sure.
It can get through a lot of different things. If you draw a lot of the times when you're playing sideboard games, as we see Freeman's going to take a mulligan down to at least 6 here, you think of, when I draw my sideboard card, perfect, that's going to swing the matchup. But you can draw multiple sideboard cards against this deck, and they can still be just fine.
Yeah. I think that the mirror match in particular is going to be one where tempo plays such a huge role. I mean, Birthing Pod is just significantly better than any of the other cards. So if one person draws Pod and the other one doesn't, well, that's a huge advantage. But each player is going to spend all their mana trying to gain an advantage every turn for the first several turns. Being on the play is big, but also just having a good mix of mana creatures is big, and having ways to interact with your opponent's mana creatures is big. And so this is one matchup where familiarity is super important. Being able to know what is the right pacing, what is the right... are you trying to lead yourself towards a spot where you can court up an Orzhov Pontiff to slow them down by hitting 2 birds? Is this... there's a lot of different ways to play these decks. And I think that most likely we're going to see whichever player is more experienced ends up coming out on top.
See, Freeman's just going to start off. He does keep his 6 cards. He's going to play Misty Rainforest and pass the turn back. Oliver going to sacrifice the Verdant Catacombs, put some birds into play. We'll see if he's going to take 1 or 3. You see the life total of 17, so it looks like he's announced he's going to take 3, and he will do that via Temple Garden, as Freeman's just going to play Woodland Cemetery. It's going to come into play tapped, of course. No swamp or forest in play.
This is devastating for Wallace. I mean, already, first of all, he had the advantage by being on the play, but taking a mulligan set him down so that he's a little bit behind now. Then when you factor in that Neal has a bird, now it's like Neal's on the play, and he has the extra card, and he didn't take a mulligan. And now Wallace is doing nothing on turn 2 as well.
Yep. He is certainly behind right now as Oliver does draw a copy of Noble Hierarch. You see a Court of Calling hiding out in the grip as well. Also a Swamp, so we'll see how he wants to lead his second turn. He's going to go with a Birthing Pod, so there it is again.
Yep, I love this. See, if he would have just developed his board and put out another mana creature, he'd be at risk of getting blown out by a random Pontiff or something like that. As it is now, at least he's got plenty more where this comes from, and it looks like he has an Eternal Witness in case the pod gets destroyed, right?
Yep. We'll see a Rage of Verdant Thicket here start the turn for Freeman. Now he's going to sacrifice that Misty Rainforest. We'll see what land he's going to get. We'll have him at 19 from now, maybe 17 in a moment. But he's got to get something on the board and get rolling here.
Yeah, the best thing he could do right now, God, see, if this is a Kitchen Finks, that's the wrong direction. What he really needs is a Harmonic Perfect.
That's a good start. Harmonic Sliver will take care of the Birthing Pod. You mentioned, of course, the Eternal Witness there in Oliver's hand, but that takes a little bit of time to set up.
Yeah, that's, I mean, and I don't know. I think that's an Eternal Witness in his hand. I couldn't tell for sure. We're going to find out pretty soon here.
There's a Finks for Oliver, and you see he just moves a Shriekmaw forward to his hand. He's got a Gavney Township.
Oh, it actually looks like he does not have an Eternal Witness.
Okay.
This is big for Wallace. Now the question is, does Wallace have something to follow it up with? Does he have a Court of Calling? Does he have a Birthing Pod? Does he have something? Because Neal is about to just have to play out some stuff, you know?
Yeah, nothing too crazy here as the pod got taken care of immediately. And, you know, that kind of begs the question, too, of are you supposed to play pod on turn 2 in this matchup? Because we talked about Thoughtseize. We don't know if either player is going to sideboard in, so if you leave it in your hand, you could get Thoughtseize. But if you play pod and don't get any value from it, it's almost like you just wasted a turn.
Yeah, my guess is that if you board it in Thoughtseize, you assume your opponent will, too.
It's like a little game inside of a game there.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like Neal does have Eternal Witness. I mean, Court of Calling, not Eternal Witness.
Yeah.
So the Court of Calling will function as an Eternal Witness next turn.
So just the Kitchen Finks, Neal goes up to 17, excuse me. And now Freeman's going to go up to 19 with the Kitchen Finks of his own. So you see the board positions here. Oliver's got a little bit more mana than Freeman with that Birds of Paradise along with the lands and the Finks. Freeman has 3 lands, access to all of his colors, a Harmonic Sliver, and a Finks of his own. But right now, Oliver's still ahead at this point.
Now, Oliver needs a land in order to be able to cord up the Eternal Witness. If he just has to play out creatures this turn, he's lost a little bit of that advantage he has.
You're going to see a Noble Hierarch come in and play pre-combat so that Kitchen Finks can come in. Exalted Trigger, it's going to make it a 4-3.
It's interesting, with basic Swamp and Gavani Township, Neal Oliver's mana is actually not as good as it would appear on the surface.
It's getting a little bit better now, because he does play a second Birds along with that Hierarch pre-combat. So now he's going to have access to his colors, but as you mentioned a couple turns ago, Orzhov Pontiff is a card that could play a huge role now in this game.
Yeah, I wonder about going this all in. I mean, this is like so... He is so deep into it, because if Wallace cords up a Pontiff, which he very easily could if he just has 1 more mana, if he cords up a Pontiff, that's going to be devastating to Neal Oliver's game. But from the looks of it, he does not have it.
We're going to see the Sliver come in along with the Finks. So an attacker for 4. Oliver's going to go down to 13. And you mentioned Court of Calling getting Pontiff. Freeman does have the court in his hand, but he does not have the 6th mana, we'll say. Of course, the creatures can provide mana as well. So Oliver kind of escapes that turn alive. He draws a forest for his turn. So now Oliver's got plenty of mana. He can take a lot of different routes this turn.
Definitely. I got a feeling he's going to be setting up some sort of a chord for Eternal Witness on the end step type of thing. Because the best thing he could do is to get a Birthing Pod going. And so Finks getting in there for 4 still leaves him with the mana to cord up the Eternal Witness, but it also gives him options depending on, on Freeman's response.
I'm going to see a Path to Exile here before the damage is dealt on the Kitchen Finks. See if Oliver maybe has a response. He's got an Abrupt Decay in his hand, and you saw him move the 2 lands. I think he might be considering Abrupt Decaying his own creature.
Strange. Oh, because he does have a forest in his hand. Yeah. If he Abrupt Decays his own creature, he'll still have enough mana for the cord. It's a little strange, though.
He's going to take care of his own creature because he doesn't want it to get paths. So persist. That's going to come back. Of course, the Finks will become a 2/1. 2 life for Oliver is going to put him up to 15. As you mentioned, he does have the Forest, which he will play. And you see the last 2 cards in Oliver's hand right now are Shriekball and Chord of Calling. And again, he still does have the necessary mana to be able to Chord of Calling for Eternal Witness to get the Birthing Pod back.
Yeah, and he's showing Gavoni Township, which is a pretty good combo with Kitchen Finks anyway.
Yep.
But this should hide reasonably well the fact that he has a Chord.
So Freemon, he draws and he puts his Forest directly into play.
So this is interesting. He now has access to Chord for Pontiff, and they're both facing each other down, both with the ability to do the combo. The best thing Freemon could do is let Oliver take the turn, and then respond with the Chord for Pontiff.
Yeah. Okay, so it looks like, okay, Freemon passed the turn back, and now you see Oliver is going to start tapping some out. We don't know if this is going to be a Chord or for a Gavony Township, but either way, all the creatures that Oliver has in play right now all have 1 toughness.
Yep.
So whatever happens, you mentioned that Pontiff play, it's going to be a pretty nasty blowout if that's what we see happen here.
Definitely.
So let's see exactly what Oliver's going to do, because it looked like Freemon just played the Forest and passed the turn back with the intentions of casting Chord of Calling. You see both players are kind of communicating back and forth on what's going to happen. Oliver's already started tapping some mana, 5, 6, okay. So here's the Chord for 3.
Oh, don't respond.
Ooh, but he did.
Oh, he's going to get Aven Mind Sensor.
He may.
That's exciting. Interesting. So instead of completely decimating Neal Oliver's board but letting him keep a Birthing Pod, he's getting Aven Mind Sensor so as to give Oliver all the mana in the world but no proactive game plan.
Oh, he's going to go. Okay, so he's actually going to go. Okay, so I see. So I see what he's. So he's going to Pontiff. He's going to clear all of this stuff up, but he's going to leave Oliver with the Eternal Witness.
So he might be afraid that Oliver is going to go get Aven Mind Sensor.
Okay.
If Oliver got Aven Mind Sensor, Freemon could get blown out by his Chord not being able to find anything. Whereas this way, all he's giving Oliver is a 2/1 body if he goes and gets the Eternal Witness. I actually like this play.
And if he feels that he can beat the Birthing Pod, like maybe he feels he can beat 1 activation of a Birthing Pod, then he feels like it's okay, because here is the Witness. It's going to get back the Birthing Pod. So we saw this line of play coming a long way away, and now he basically feels as though he can beat a Birthing Pod in 1 activation of it.
Yeah, see, I still think, I personally, I think I would have gotten greedy and just assumed he was going to get Eternal Witness and then kill the Witness with the Pontiff, just so that Oliver doesn't have a creature to sack to his Birthing Pod, because as it is now, he can sack the Eternal Witness and go get either Murderous Redcap, Linvala, Ranger of Eos. I mean, he's got a lot of great options.
So after both players do shuffle, they present the decks. You see the life totals. We're at 15 apiece here. Oliver's going to draw his card. It's a Verdant Catacombs. He's got the Birthing Pod he got back from the Witness, and of course he has that Shriekmaw that he's had for some time now. So it looks like we're going to start taking maybe the Birthing Pod route in this game.
Oh, definitely. What do you think? There's Murderous Redcap, Ranger of Eos, and Linvala. My guess is Ranger of Eos.
It's tough. I mean, all of them play a very different role in the game.
Yeah, so Linvala, the nice advantage is that she can dominate the board and defend. Murderous Redcap does a reasonable job of that. Ranger of Eos is the worst at defending, but the most proactive for trying to win the game in 2 turns.
So activated abilities of creatures your opponents control cannot be activated. You see the creatures on the board for Freemon right now. None of those actually have activated abilities, so it doesn't play that huge of a role. Maybe the plan here is, you're Birthing Podding into a 4 with the intentions of, okay, I just want to Birthing Pod once because I'm more worried about getting to 5 to get to Revelark, and then starting to do some really crazy stuff.
Well, Ranger of Eos is the best thing. I mean, actually, I guess Murderous Redcap and Ranger of Eos are both fantastic to actually sacrifice to go get Revelark. You probably don't get Linvala if your planning is to go up to Revelark.
So the way that
he's probably going to get Ranger.
Yeah.
Because he left the mana open.
We both thought the exact same thing, because the way that he did this, he took 4 damage as opposed to he only would have needed to take 2. So it looks like we might go see a Ranger of Eos here, and that's exactly what he's going to go get. Trigger on that, he'll be able to search for 2 1-drops. So we'll see him get
Sarah Seer and a Noble Hierarch or a bird.
Probably Hierarch. No longer Deathrite Shaman. So there is the Seer. I can tell you maybe tested this deck a little for the Pro Tour. You see the lines here. And there is a bird. Maybe flying a little bit more important at this point. We'll see. As Freeman's going to untap, he's got to contend with the Birthing Pod and the fact that, a 5 or a 2 can come out of the woodwork next turn. And we can't forget about that Gavony Township that's out there as well.
Yeah, and Gavin Township's actually in large part why I think you have to get greedy and assume that he's going to get Eternal Witness, because even if you, or actually rather, it's why you can't go get Mind Sensor there. If Wallace had corded for a Mind Sensor, he could have messed up Neal's cord, but Neal would still have tons of mana and a Township.
Yeah.
You know.
It's the fact that this deck can play both the fair and the unfair game. That's what makes it so powerful.
And quite a variety of unfair games at that.
So let's see what Freemon wants to do on this turn. He's starting to tap some mana. He's got 4 of it. And this is a Murderous Redcap. Okay. So that's actually pretty good in this situation. Takes out the 4-drop in Ranger VO, so that means that Oliver can't pot from 4 to 5.
Yeah, plus, I mean, we're getting into the spot where Neal's life total is very much in jeopardy. He's down to 5. That means not only is he facing lethal next turn, he's also looking at having less life to be able to use to save mana.
So Oliver's going to drop down to 5 from the attack. You see, Freeman's at a pretty comfortable 15 as far as life total is concerned, and all of a sudden, in a game that we felt Oliver was pretty far ahead in, things have really shifted here.
That core was big.
Yeah, off of that Orzhov Pontiff.
Yep.
Now, the other thing that happened here, too, Freemon took 2 to play Temple Garden untapped. That represents a Path Exile, potentially Dismember as well, some sort of 1 mana effect. Of course, we have the deck list in front of us, so we have an idea of what he can have, but Oliver does not, as he untaps and begins to take his turn.
Yeah, I mean, the extra life loss right now means so little to Wallace. He knows that if he loses, it's going to be because Neal goes infinite, you know? He's going to be just looping some kind of a combo. What he wants to do is just make things as hard as possible for Neal Oliver, put him in as tough a bind as possible.
So you see Oliver starting to do a little math here. He's got the Misty in his hand. He searched for the Viscerous here, and he has a Shriek Maw. What do we think? What road are we trying to go down to get back in this game?
Man, so he's got a... All he can really do, if Shriek Maw is his only creature, all he can really do is pot up a 2. Scavenging Ooze could give him some life to work with. And the question is, do you Shriek Maw at all just to kill something? But there's not even good targets for that.
So it looks like we're going to go potting. You see he uses his birds for the green mana, so that taps the swamp as well. Not going to take 2 damage, really can't afford to go down to 3. So he's going to search up a 2-drop. Will it be the Ooze? It looks like it will be.
Yeah, I think the Ooze is the card that can prevent the most damage. It's a shame he can't get Malera or whatever, but he's just too far away. I mean, he's got Viscerous and his choice of 2s, but he doesn't have that kind of time. He's facing a lot of pressure, and it's not even just the 7 damage showing. It's also the fact that the red cap is potentially yet 1 more damage, and he wants to be able to use this Misty Rainforest.
You see Oliver's going through his graveyard, showing Freemon all the creatures that he has over there. Looks like 6 or 7 to remove to Scavenging. There's also one thing to keep in mind here too, Patrick, is he used that swamp to be able to pod, and so now that may have been a bit of a misstep as well, because by using the swamp, we don't know if he's going to need to use that Misty Rainforest to search up an Overgrown Tomb. That's going to cost a lot of life, so we don't know. Maybe it'd be better off to use the Township. We'll find out if that comes back to hurt him as Freemon draws a card. No, it looks like he's got a Dismember in the grip.
Yeah, I think the only way that it matters, the tapping the swamp versus the Township, is primarily for bluffing. He's representing I do not have Abrupt Decay.
Okay.
But all the Misty Rainforest is going to find a basic forest, and the 2 forests and the Temple Garden are all going to tap just to activate the Scavenging Ooze many, many times. Once he knew that he wasn't going to use the Shriek Maw, it didn't matter on his end. It's just about preserving information. Either way, though, Wallace is going to get in there pretty hardcore. And what we're going to see is actually Scavenging Ooze gets to block before activations, and Wallace can't dismember it because Neal can pump 4 times in response.
And that's exactly what's going to happen. So Scavenging Ooze is going to get in front of the Kitchen Finks. You're going to see activations 1 at a time. They're going to gain Oliver a little bit of life. These are all going to resolve here. So Redcap, Harmonic Sliver, and Pontiff are going to come through. Don't forget about the Kusali Pride Mage that was played pre-combat. That plays a pretty important role here as well.
This is big. I think Wallace just messed up. He was supposed to dismember in response to the first activation because Neal doesn't have to go all the way. He can now just go big enough to stop the Finks, because if Wallace waits until they're all down, Neal doesn't even have to keep pumping.
It's true.
He has enough life to survive the attack, and if Freemon tries to dismember before the Finks does damage, the Ooze will grow out of range. He's still going to be able to kill the Ooze, but it cost him his Finks.
Yep.
Which means that Oliver gets to exile it.
Yeah, with the persistent in the stack, he exiles
Absolutely.
that, and that's when you're going to see the Dismember in response to the Ooze activation that's targeting the Finks. Now, that's still going to resolve, and the Finks is going to come back, and the Dismember will take care of the Ooze, but it feels like Oliver may have bought himself a turn here.
No, yeah, the Finks is not going to come back.
Yeah, no, that's, yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Oliver, I mean, that was huge. He, first of all, the Finks is completely gone instead of being a 3-2 in play. I mean, it's literally just the exact same board state, except the Wallace is down a Kitchen Finks, which gives Neal a little more breathing room. You know, it's so tough because Neal has just 3 life to work with, and Wallace has so many lethal threats. But now, is that a Kasali Pride Mage that did not get activated?
That is.
That's interesting. He did not pay any life for his Dismember.
Yep.
Because if he would have paid 2 life, he could have destroyed the birthing pod.
This opens up a risky avenue here as Birds of Paradise is the draw here. Again, Oliver's had that Shriekmaw in his hand for a very, very long time. It has not had a huge impact on this game. It looks like we might finally see it get cast, though. So there is Shriekmaw hard cast to take out the Kasali Pride Mage. And our follow-up is going to be the Seer.
It has to be.
Yep.
Yep. Now that he tapped this way.
So now he passes the turn back. So now Freeman's going to untap. He's going to take a draw, and we'll see what he can find.
Not having that extra life to, you know, to be able to make the mana for Kasali Pride Mage seems so strange.
Yeah.
But
because now we're getting in the territory now where if Oliver gets on top of that birthing pod, you know, this game is still in Freeman's favor, I feel like, right now, but it's shifting back now.
Because now if Freeman attacks with everything, Oliver can block the red cap with the Shriekmaw, block the Pontiff or the Harmonic, probably the Pontiff. Yeah, or the Harmonic Sliver, honestly.
So what kind of blocks we're going to see here?
Interesting. So he does go the other way with it, which will keep him at 2 life, and now he just needs any one blocker. But he has a Bird of Paradise in his hand. Yep. I think he's actually in pretty good shape, if not for the fact that Freeman's going to follow up with a Revel Arc.
So you see the dust is going to settle. Oliver's going to go down to 2. Shriekmaw Birthing Pod on Oliver's side. Freeman, as you mentioned, does have that Relic Arc in his hand. That's why you see him consulting his graveyard right now. Has the Red Cap and Pontiff in play. Also Birds of Paradise, but he's going to hardcast the 4/3 flyer and pass the turn back. So now Oliver's got to contend with the Revel Arc. That can attack in the air for lethal, but also get creatures back, and he's going to take a draw. The top card went to the bottom from this Seer. Looks like he adds a land to his hand off the top and then a Birds of Paradise. Now, with Birthing Pod, anything is possible, so we'll see if Oliver can find his way out of this jam.
Man, so the tough thing is that if he uses so the bird alone is not enough to live, because only the bird could block the Revel Arc, and if the Shriekmaw blocks the red cap, he's going to take 1 extra damage.
Yep. Take 1 from the Pontiff, then 1 from the red cap coming back into play to persist.
So he needs to go get something. Does he have a second Scavenging Ooze? I don't think he does.
Let's take a look at these
no, he
twos.
does. He has exactly 2. 1 in the board, 1 in the main.
Okay.
Now, the problem is if he goes and gets the Ooze, he won't have enough. He has to lose the bird, and he won't have a blocker for the Revel Arc. He can block the ground creatures, but he's going to end up taking 5, so he would need to be able to activate the Ooze 4 times, which he cannot.
Yeah, and part of that is because he's a little bit short on green mana because he can't pay the 2 life for a Birthing Pod right now because, of course, he is at 2.
He's exactly 1 green mana short because of having Swamp and Gavani Township.
So Freeman's going to untap. He takes a draw here and basically presenting lethal damage at this point. But again, it's easy for you guys at home as well as us here in the booth to say, yeah, just attack with everything. What's the worst that can happen? But there are a lot of bad things that can happen. A card like Court of Calling and, you know, an Abrupt Decay. There are different things that can occur.
So this is interesting. If he had gotten the Scavenging Ooze, he would be 1 mana short. But the red cap the red cap would be 1 point of the damage.
Okay.
And you can stop that 1 point of damage by using the Ooze.
Yep.
I think he actually had exactly enough mana, if he had the second Ooze in his deck, where he could sack the bird, go get the Ooze, then be able to activate the Ooze 3 times. He could... God, no, you know, it still doesn't work because he's
a little short on green mana, maybe?
No, he's got exactly enough green mana, but the problem is that you need to gain enough life so the Revel Arc doesn't kill you.
Sure.
And he needs to use all the Ooze activations just to gain that much life, which then leave him not a mana to use on the Ooze.
On the red cap.
On the red cap.
Gotcha.
Yep. So
gotcha.
he was, yeah. 1 more mana would have been 2 more life, but he was just a tiny little bit short in a real close, tight game. He gave himself chances by mising that kitchen finks, but it wasn't quite enough.
You see the way the games kind of go back and forth here between Pod. That was a game where, Freemon takes a mulligan on the play, doesn't accelerate mana at all, but off of, drawing that 6th mana, we'll say, obviously the 4th land and the 2 creatures to be able to cord, Pontiff basically playing the role of Wrath of God there, allows him to catch back up in the game. And even though Freemon never had a pod, Freemon never had a pod in that game, but he was able to actually win it. So this matchup is very intricate. It's not as simple as, I drew Birthing Pod and you didn't. Okay, this is over.
Not. No, as we talked about before the game, it's very much getting a mana advantage, getting a tempo advantage, and the fact that the Pontiff was able to kill 3 mana sources and provide some amount of pressure, that was huge. That was very much the game deciding play.
So we'll see how these players want to change. They're looking, you see Freemon on his right. He's kind of looking, maybe he's going to re-sideboard. Oliver looks happy with his configuration. But if you guys are just joining us, Cedric Phillips, Patrick Chapin, Star City Games is presenting Grand Prix Richmond, the largest constructed Grand Prix of all time. We are in round 3 of 9 for today, 15 overall. And for your tweets, join in on the conversation. It's a rather large one out there on Twitter at SCG Live, hashtag GPRICH all weekend long. Myself, the Hall of Famer Patrick Chapin, and Matthias Hunt, more than happy to interact with you guys all weekend long on what is going to be one hell of a weekend, my friend.
Oh, absolutely. It is a circus. It's crazy because looking into this room behind us right now, there are more people here than any constructed Grand Prix ever. And that's just this room.
Yeah.
The next room over has another 1,400 people.
Yeah, you guys don't even see that room. And we have some rooms upstairs as well for all the side events that will be taking place as well this weekend. So mega shout out to everyone who came out to this event, because we count the 4,300 that are playing in the tournament, but we haven't even counted the people who are just here hanging out.
Oh yeah,
playing side events. There are around 5,000, maybe 6,000 people here just coming out for some
side events
magic.
Have been pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Yesterday I saw pictures from some people played in a time spiral block sealed deck.
Yep.
And 2 people sitting next to each other busted Tarmogoyfs, and it's like,
it's a good
winner.
That's a good clean living right there.
Winner.
So we turn our attention back here to Neal Oliver versus Wallace Freemon. Round 3, game 3 between these 2 players playing Melira. I think a deck that we're going to see a lot of on camera this weekend due to its success over the course of the modern format. We've seen a lot of cards come and go, but one thing that has remained the same is that Melira has won a lot of tournaments in this format. And wouldn't be too surprised to see either one of these players get a win here and then move on and have a very, very nice tournament with what is arguably the best deck in the format.
Yeah. It's definitely at the very least one of the good ones, and very possibly the best in terms of just having the most credentials, the most tournaments that it's got under its belt over the past year.
Birds of Paradise off of an Overgrown Tomb here for Oliver. He's going to go down to 18 to start things off in game number 3. We're going to see a Verdant Catacombs here for Freemon. Let's see if he actually has some acceleration, because he has not done that really in either game, but we do see a Birds in his hand.
Yep. Yeah, he's very wisely sculpting out the next several turns ahead of time, making sure he knows exactly which land he wants to get, how he's going to play. He also doesn't want to have to slow down every turn and reveal which things he's thinking about, which ones he's not. He wants to know ahead of time what is the default plan and what could potentially cause me to change direction.
He'll get an Overgrown Tomb as well, so he's going to go down to 17, and we'll likely see him deploy that mana accelerant. And this is going to be a much faster paced game than I think the other 2, just because both players are going to be jumping the curve with the mana.
Yeah, although this is definitely a matchup that is prone to huge tempo changes, so either player with a timely cord or a timely birthing pod, or even just drawing one of the one-ofs out of nowhere to surprise them a turn before they thought that you were capable of doing it.
There's a swamp there for Oliver. Let's see what the follow-up's going to be. Yep, so he's got a 3-2. He's going to push himself back up to 20.
The nice thing about Kitchen Finks is that even though it doesn't actually directly interact with the primary, with the birthing pod itself or the cord or any of the normal things like that, it puts a lot of pressure on the other guy, and it isn't really hosed by anything directly. Mm-hmm. It's just a reliable way to advance your board that doesn't leave you super vulnerable.
Freemon going to play a Scavenging Ooze here, a card that obviously plays a huge role in this matchup. If last game was any indication, plays a Godless Shrine tapped and passes it back to Oliver. See, Oliver has a Birds in his hand. He's got a Misty Rainforest. You see a Dismember as well. So it looks like both players have boarded in a little bit more spot removal.
Yeah, hitting key creatures like Scavenging Ooze is it could be real big, you know.
Even at the cost of 4 life, apparently, as there's a Noble Hierarch pre-combat. Here's an Exalted Trigger. Fink's going to come across for 4. Freeman's going to go down to 13. And we'll see if Oliver does want to maybe fire off that Dismember now, or if he wants to save it for later and pick a better spot.
Yeah, I think there's a real good chance he uses it here. He could pay 2 extra life. Oh, no, so here he might just spend all the mana. The thought of investing more Birds of Paradise to the board has got to be a little risky to him, given the way the game went last time. But it looks like he might do it again. Yeah,
there's a Dismember. He'll have to pay 2 life for that. You see him tap the Swamp and the Birds for that. And again, his hand right now is a Birds of Paradise and a fetch land, so he doesn't have that awesome card that lets him really get going. Now, he could draw a Birthing Pot or a Gavany Township at any time and really go into overdrive, but for right now, playing a relatively fair game of Magic.
Yeah, whereas Freeman has access to Ranger, Bios, and Revelark, which, well, not the same as Court of Calling. Oh, and Eternal Witness.
Yep.
Well, not the same as Court of Calling or Birthing Pod. If you have Revelark, Eternal Witness, that's already a pretty big thing.
Yep.
So he's a little slow at the moment, and he's getting beat down, but he needs to try to figure out how to stabilize and set up for the Revelark, Eternal Witness sort of mid-rangey game.
Yeah, I'd say he has the cards. He has the cards that he's looking for, and of course he doesn't know Oliver's hand, like Patrick and I and you guys do at home. But given the context of we can see what's going on, he's definitely got the cards available. But again, as we saw in the last game, things can change on a dime.
Oh, definitely. So now, what he's got to consider here is there any chance he's supposed to Dismember and then Eternal Witness the Dismember? That's one of the things he was considering.
He's going to Witness right now. It looks like he's valuing Scavenging Ooze very, very highly. He's going to pass the turn back.
Yeah, the nice thing about the Ooze is that it can defend against this attack, but it also is meaningfully interactive and disruptive. And the nice thing is that the Ooze, even if Oliver kills it, just makes the Revelark even better because it'll be able to get the Eternal Witness and the Ooze.
So Oliver's going to sacrifice that Misty Rainforest, go search out a Temple Garden before beginning his next turn. Scavenging Ooze is really having a huge impact on this format, not just in this deck, but also Diekman's Twin deck, and just we've seen it in Jund and Black-Green decks as well. Just really, really good card.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's been joked a number of times. The Scavenging Ooze is like a green Tarmogoyf.
Yeah.
It's a green creature for 1 and a green that you can just throw in decks and have it be a big increase in power.
Now that was a huge draw by Oliver because he was short on things to do with just a Misty Rainforest and a Birds of Paradise in his hand, but he has drawn a Gavany Township, and now he can start to accelerate things a little bit and make those mana accelerants, which aren't very relevant, actually relevant now.
Oh yeah, now he's got a plan. I mean, first of all, obviously Kitchen Finks and Gavany Township is already a pretty big thing, but with all those birds and hierarchs, if he activates it just one time, he's safely out of Pontiff range. And I think we're going to see him use the Township proactively here. Get the 1 extra point of damage in from the Kitchen Finks, but also just to get all of his guys big enough to live through the Pontiff.
You see Freeman is considering using a Dismember right now on the Kitchen Finks. I'm not sure that really accomplishes a ton right now, so it looks like he's just going to be on chump blocking duty with the Eternal Witness.
No. This is fine, though, because if Oliver lets the trade happen, which is the most obvious thing, the Finks will come back with a persist counter, and Wallace can try to Dismember the Finks in response to the Township.
Sure. Well, no trade because of Exalted.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah, that is a good point, and that is kind of strange.
So Finks,
but it does make the Revelark better when it eventually hits.
This is true. So Finks takes down the Eternal Witness in combat. Wallace basically saying, I'm at 13, I want to preserve my life total a little bit more here, because I know I'm going to be under the gun from the Gavany Township that's taking place. And, for Wallace right now, he just wants to be able to draw lands, be able to start casting 2 spells in a turn, because right now his hand is very, very expensive.
And he did Eternal Witness back a Scavenging Ooze instead of a land. But now we're going to see that Ooze hit and see what kind of an impact it can have. He can Dismember the Finks and then Ooze it in response.
I think that might be his line here. He's going to go with a Noble Hierarch.
He still has that available to him if he pays 4 life. It's going to cost him a lot, though. He'll have to fetch a Forest Untapped and use the Godless Shrine and still take 5.
So here's a Township activation. And we might see a response here from Wallace Freeman. We'll see what happens. See, he's digging in because he knows he's in some trouble right now. And so the Township activation is going to resolve. I suppose there's no reason to actually move just yet.
Oh, he could have done it right there.
He could have made a move right there, but he's deciding on waiting. As you saw, oh no, a birthing pod is the draw here for Oliver.
Devastating.
Things are going to get a little more interesting now.
Yeah, but I don't think they're going to be that interesting for long.
Yeah, I've got a feeling you're right about that.
So this is big. Not only does Oliver have him behind the gun on board, he's got birthing pod, and so now Oliver has to judge how much am I going to commit to the assault that I'm already laying versus how much am I going to try to just leverage this birthing pod into something, and how big of a factor is that ooze?
You know, it's not only that, too. You think about birthing pod, you have to think about all the, in this particular situation, the 2s and the 4s that he can get.
Yep.
You know, he's got, 2 scavenging uses throughout his 75. He's got some nice bullets that he can search for as far as 4s are concerned. But what he's going to do right now is looks like, let's get into the red zone here. So Flyers and Birds of Paradise, they're 1-2s momentarily, can turn into 2-3s. He's got a Kitchen Finks attacking that as a 4-3 that can turn into a 5-4. Freeman's going to start by sacrificing that Verdant Catacombs, go down to 12 at the moment. We'll see if he searches out a basic or a non-basic.
My guess is basic forest, definitely. He needs every point of life he can get, and he's got plenty of his colors figured out.
Well, there is your basic forest, so the prediction is correct there. We'll see how he wants to block, if he does want to block. You saw that Oliver did leave Noble Hierarch back, so does not attack with that, which is a 1-2 that could turn into a 2-3.
Yeah, in this spot, Wallace's play is pretty scripted. He really doesn't have a lot of options beyond dismembering the Kitchen Finks and eating it with the ooze. But the question is going to be, how is Oliver going to respond to this? Freeman will take 5 from his lands, 2 from his from the birds, and then an additional life gain will put Freeman at, what is that, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9, 10. God, I think that'll put Freeman at around 7 when all is said and done.
So Dismember's it's gonna cost 4, so he's gonna go down to 8 from this, and then he goes up to 9 when he removes Finks with the Persist in the stack, and then he'll take 2, so he'll go down to 7, potentially 5, if we have an activation of the township.
Yeah, most likely though, Oliver's gonna be like, okay, that's good enough. I should, activate the pod here. I should do some podding of some sort.
But you see him organizing his mana here, and he is gonna go with townshipping, it looks like.
Interesting.
So he wants to keep giving the beatdowns in the air. So it's going to put Freeman down to 5. And what this is representing, Patrick, is obviously a lethal attack for the next turn. There's the Birds of Paradise that's in the way there. And if Oliver does draw a removal spell, things change. But he's basically representing lethal in the air right now.
Yeah, and this doesn't put a lot of creatures in the graveyard. So Freeman's a little bit limited in how much scavenging oozing he can even do.
Now, we do know that Freeman has a Revelark in his hand. You see he's drawn a Malira, and he also has that Ranger Vios from much earlier in the game. But he is being assaulted in the air by Birds of Paradise. He has to figure out the best way to go about stopping this.
Oh, so that Ranger is huge, though, because now he can play the Revelark as a blocker, and he'll have Birds of Paradise and Revelark to both block with.
Okay.
And if the Revelark dies, it can get back a Birds of Paradise and an Eternal Witness, and the Eternal Witness get back the Revelark.
Oh.
And then he can later play the Ranger. I mean, he's actually got an incredible amount of action. Oliver, I think, is going to have to switch gears and start potting.
It's not a bad gear to switch to.
I mean, that's your backup plan. That's
yeah, that is not a bad place to switch to.
But as far as people at 5 life facing 6 points of angry Birds of Paradise damage, Freeman is not in that bad of a spot. He has a surprisingly good anti-Birds of Paradise beatdown draw. So I think we're gonna see some Revelark action. The only question is if he's so greedy as to want to commit some more a Ranger BS and go get 2 more birds or something.
Now here's the thing too. He's obviously in a difficult situation right now. He's trying to figure out his way out of this hole and what he can do. When you're in a situation like this, that scavenging use might be kind of. You might want to leave back on defense, but he's got to get his points in while he can too.
Oh no, yeah, but I think you're right. I think he's going to have to keep the ooze back just to threaten to block the Noble Hierarch if it comes to that, because times are tough right now.
Yeah.
Plus, it's possible Oliver just busts out with like a removal spell.
That's true. You see Revelark is going to hit the table, going to leave the ooze, that's a 3-3. The birds, of course, an 0-1, and the Revelark a 4-3 back on defense. Oliver going to sacrifice that Misty Rainforest on Freeman's end step. He'll go get an Overgrown Tomb, and you do see the board here for Oliver of those 2-3 Birds of Paradise and a 2-3 Noble Hierarch, with the potential for all of those creatures become a 3-4 via Gavney Township. This doesn't account for Oliver's draw step, of course, and we do know that he's been holding a birthing pod since last turn. So we'll see what the Grand Prix Las Vegas champion can find for his draw step.
So one important starting point is that Oliver can go get a Scavenging Ooze of his own.
Yeah.
And by pitching the Noble Hierarch, getting a Scavenging Ooze, he now not only disrupts Freeman's Scavenging Ooze a little bit, he actually makes the Revel Arc very, 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 watered down. Like the ability to ooze the Eternal Witness and ooze the Birds of Paradise that would come back, and then ooze the Revel Arc. I mean, you won't even need to ooze the Revel Arc at that point. So I think Oliver's got to figure out, is there anything better than just setting up the Birthing Pod for ooze and slowing the game down a little bit?
Yeah, as you mentioned, it might be time to pump the brakes here. As Oliver drew Gavany Township for the turn, he's got Birthing Pod. I can figure, he's probably going through his mind of, okay, what are the chains? What do I have to do to get myself back into this? What can he do? And, more importantly, Freeman's had a lot of cards in his hand over the course of this game. Yeah. So he's also got to think, all right, what does he have in his hand? Does he have removal? Does he have Birthing Pod? Heaven forbid he has Chord of Calling. That's going to be a problem as well.
Definitely.
One thing Oliver does have, though, is he's got some life to play with, as opposed to the last game, where he dealt a lot of damage to himself via Birthing Pod. He's sitting at 16. Looks like he's going down to 14 via Phyrexian mana.
This is interesting. He kept the Gavony Township untapped, which is really strange because he's going to need every bit of ooze mana he can get, I think. But he perhaps already has some use for that mana elsewhere.
He's going to sacrifice the Noble Hierarch, going to pay 2 more Phyrexian mana as well. So it looks like he's going to go down to 12. And now he's going through the deck, a familiar feeling. He went by and stopped at Kasali Pride Mage and said, that's not it. Let's keep going. Starts back over, and we see a Scavenging Ooze yet again.
Now, I like using your ooze pre-combat, because if Wallace uses his bird to use his ooze in response, you can respond by removing it again, but the bird will no longer be available as a blocker. Oh, the tough thing is, though, he only has 1 green land now because of the way that he tapped.
Yeah. He plays a Township Pest the turn back now. So this might be... Now, he's doing a couple things here, of course. He's representing a Township activation off of those birds and the other Township in the Temple Garden. But, again, does he have enough green mana to be able to do what he wants to do? We saw this happen last game, too.
I mean, he can't really afford to just... I mean, I guess he can ship the turn because the extra life isn't that big of a deal. But, I mean, Freeman is starting to present a pretty big board himself. And Oliver's life is not that high, all things considered.
And now you actually see both players kind of playing a game of chicken, because we're on Oliver's end step right now, and I think Freeman's considering, all right, am I supposed to activate Scavenging Ooze right now? And he comes to the conclusion of, no, I'm not. So let me untap, let me take a draw, and let me work with all of the information that I have present, because Oliver has no cards in his hand. All of his cards are on the table right now, and Freeman's the one with all the options. Yeah,
and Freeman's got a lot of strange potential lines he's going to have to consider. I mean, there's Ranger Vios. Where all does that open up? He's got Viscera Seer already. He's got a Township of his own. He's got this Revel Arc that's doing some happy dance against the Scavenging Ooze. But he also has to make sure that he can keep enough blockers on the table that he doesn't just get surprise killed by a removal spell.
So Freeman is going to begin to tap some mana on this very, very crucial turn. And we're going to see which avenue he decides to go down, because there are a lot of appetizing ones, and it's hard to say which one is best.
My guess is he leads with Ranger Vios. Being able to find 2 more birds is exactly what he wants right now. The problem, though, is that he has to make sure he doesn't lose to Orzhov Pontiff sweeping the board again.
Yeah. So now there's a Murderous Red Cap.
Oh, okay. He has yet another option.
And he's going to target the Scavenging Ooze. And now it looks like now Oliver is almost forced. Wow, this gets really interesting. This is a really, really nice play, because he's got the Viscera here in his hand.
So he's going to be able to finish the job against the Ooze.
Yeah. So now Township is going to activate. It's going to make those birds into 3/4s. But he's still got to be careful, though. This is still tricky.
I mean, that's 6 points of birds damage.
Yeah, this is still tricky.
But the nice thing is, if he gets that Ooze off the table, his Revel Arc is so much stronger.
Yeah. So there's the Township activation. Ooze becomes a 3/3 with 2 damage on it. You see the birds are tapped. Those are 3/4s.
The tough thing, though, is that because he tapped this way, instead of tapping the Noble Hierarch and leaving the Godless Shrine or Overgrown Tomb untapped, in order to cast the Viscera Seer, he'd have to tap his only bird, which then would leave him with no flying blockers beyond the Revel Arc and the potential of a single Dismember ending the game for him.
So let's see if he sees the play of casting the Viscera Seer, sacrificing the red cap.
Yeah. I can tell that is the tap of the Noble Hierarch of a man who realizes what he has done.
Yep.
Now that's not necessarily a deal breaker, but it is going to put some pressure on him.
He's going to ooze right now. He's going to remove that Noble Hierarch to gain a life since, of course, Oliver's defenses are down, and he just passes the turn back, so he does not use Viscerous here to finish off the Scavenging Ooze via a red cap sacrifice. So Oliver is going to untap. He'll take a turn. And even though, it seems like Freeman's kind of, I guess, in the driver's seat a little bit here, Oliver's the one that can, again, really turn this game around very quickly.
So the nice thing, if you would have just played the Viscerous here, is that he always has the option, if there's a Dismember or a Path or anything like that, if he has the Viscerous here in play, he can respond, and he's killed the Ooze, he can respond by sacrificing the bird and sacrificing the Revelarch and getting back the bird and making sure that he has a blocker.
You make it sound so easy.
Oh, it's definitely not.
Yeah.
That's the tough thing about these decks with, Birthing Pod and Chord have so many different paths they can take all the time. All the mumbo jumbo I'm saying, I have no idea. There's so many different lines. These players are much more experienced with these decks. I got to imagine that they each have a plan that they're trying to go down, and with just 2.5 minutes left in the round, it's not like they actually have all the time in the world to consider every possible line of play. And this has been a marathon third game.
You're going to see a main phase activation of Scavenging Ooze there by Oliver. It's going to turn the Ooze into a 4/4. It's going to gain him a life. Here come the 3/4 Birds of Paradise with the potential to become 4/5s. That means Revelarch's going to lose in combat with them. Freeman weighing his options, figuring out the best way to block, because he has to do some sort of blocking right now.
It's tough, though, because I think at this point, with that Ooze active, Freeman's game is going to fall apart pretty quickly. Now, fortunately, Oliver doesn't have a ton of mana right now, but this is a real tough spot Wallace Freeman's in.
Let's also keep one thing in mind as well. Let's say that, Oliver let's say that Freeman lets something through. Oliver activates Township. He puts Freeman down to 2. That opens up the ability to, if Oliver draws a 3-drop, to go to Search of Murderous Red Cap and do the last points of damage. There's just so many different things that, when you're in the pod mirror, that you have to play around.
Oh, definitely. And there's a very good probability that he's not even going to activate the Township at all. He's threatening it, but really he just wants to have his bird trade with the Revelarch so that the Ooze can eat the stuff that Revelarch would get if there was any. I don't think there even is there, but he gets to use the Birthing Pod and Ooze even more. Get rid of the Revelarch while you can. Yeah, so as expected, there's the trade. The big thing is Oliver wants to activate that Birthing Pod some more, because as much as this Township plan is a good thing, he's not that far from just finishing Freeman off with a couple Birthing Pod activations.
So Freeman's going to go down to 3 as he let that one Bird of Paradise through. Revelarch is going to trade off with the Birds of Paradise. And you see, because there's nothing in the graveyard for Freeman to get back via Revelarch is just kind of a glorified 4/3 for 5 mana there.
But 4/3 flyer for 5, I mean, you would draft that reasonably high.
I would take that pretty high, actually. Only 1 white in the casting cost, too. Maybe
Definitely.
Splash it.
Well, it's splashed in this deck, but...
Oliver in his second main phase now. Of course, he can remove things with Ooze if he'd like. He's got Birthing Pod activations to consider. I believe his card in his hand is a Kitchen Finks. But you see him weighing his options.
So many ways he can use his cards.
And you see the clock in the middle there. We're underneath 30 seconds, so I don't think this is the first time a pod mirror has gone to time.
Yeah, this is going to be... And do we know if they have any extra minutes?
I believe that clock is correct. We will get confirmation from our table spotter, just in case. You see a draw here. Okay, so he's got a Malira. He's got that Ranger Veos that he's had for some time, and it looks like a land was the draw.
So that's actually very close to infinite, because he has the red cap in play. If he plays Ranger, Malira, and Viscerous here,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
that is the entire combo,
1, 2, 3,
except
4.
the Scavenging Ooze is in play.
Oh my.
He literally has everything, but the Ooze is in play. Which, obviously, I mean, it's tough to have known, and obviously Oliver's turn would go different if there was a Viscerous Seer in play. But Freeman just naturally has the combo if he can play around that Ooze.
The other thing that's really interesting too here is we didn't even mention is Oliver passed his turn back and didn't activate Birthing Pod, basically saying that this 3/4 birds in this 4/4 Scavenging Ooze are much more important than anything I can search for. As we're being told right now, the time is correct. This is turn 0, so Oliver's going to have turns 1, 3, and 5. Freeman will have turns 0, 2, and 4.
This is wild.
And
and this is his big hope. If they trade Oozes,
but it won't be a trade. Don't forget about the Exalted trigger on...
Oh, okay, sure. But
he could have tricked them.
Yeah, if the other Ooze blocks, it could eat this Ooze, but then not have any green mana left.
Sure.
Which is then lets him go infinite.
Yep. So came across, 5 damage comes across, Oliver goes down to 8.
How can he set it up? See, it's interesting. He's got Ranger Veos and Malira. but he needs to not die to that lethal bird.
All right, so he's going to show Ranger.
So this is where he gets Viscera Seer and another Bird of
Probably
Paradise,
another
most
bird.
likely.
All right, so this is going to resolve. It's time to go searching. And, the other thing, too, is by doing all of this stuff, he also wants to be able to keep some green mana open for scavenging use as well. He's got so much to balance right now.
Definitely. This is going to be a nail-biter.
So Freemon, you see him bringing birds, and there's the Seer. So our mistake, we thought on the last turn when he played red cap to target the scavenging ooze, we thought that he had a Seer in his hand, but the card was actually a Malera that was in his hand. So we do apologize for that.
Which makes his line look all the better, which is why,
Yes.
as we said, we're just sitting up here like the peanut gallery and the Muppets.
There are your two targets, Birds of Paradise and Viscera Seer. And we know that Freeman's last card in his hand is the Malera. So he has 3 cards virtually in his hand right now. Shuffling his deck, we'll present it over to Oliver momentarily. And as you mentioned, he does have access to the infinite combo, but the scavenging is on Oliver's side is what's messing this up.
Definitely. But he's facing a lethal Bird of Paradise in the air, Scavenging Ooze, which is also lethal and going to require a chump block, potentially, and a Birthing Pod, which opens up so many possible lines of play for Neal Oliver, Grand Prix Vegas champion.
All right, so we're going to see some ooze activation here. Now, again, Freeman could have played Viscera Seer this turn. He could have played Bird off a Noble Hierarch and then Viscera Seer off Overgrown Tomb. Chose not to. Wants to leave Noble Hierarch available for, it looks like, Scavenging Ooze activation.
Yeah, because now if Neal Oliver activates, so if Freeman taps his Hierarch, Oliver can respond by oozing again, and then Freeman can activate, tap his Bird to activate again, which puts him up to a comfortable 4 life, except that he's still dead to a Dismember or Path Exile on this plan, because the Bird could go to a 4/5 once it gets another Township activation.
So you're going to see some ooze activations go back and forth, some responses, okay. Oliver wins the Scavenging Ooze War. His ooze becomes a 6/6. He moves up to 9. This will be turn 1 of extra turns. Neal Oliver will take a draw. It is a Revelark.
Revelark.
I don't think that has a huge impact on things.
This is interesting. So now what he could do is sack the ooze to the Birthing Pod and go get Orzhov Pontiff, which removes both birds and puts the Bird of Paradise into lethal range, except that Wallace still has an ooze. So if you don't have enough mana to fizzle the ooze activation, but he might have enough. I haven't done the math here, because that's the default plan, right?
I think that
You
is.
can't, because you'll lose your own ooze.
Yeah.
Wow. So does he have enough for a Gavani Township activation?
All right, so he's going to...
He actually does.
Yeah, so he's going to sacrifice this ooze. You see him searching through his deck furiously.
Wow, if he gets the Pontiff here, that's enormous.
There is a Pontiff.
Oh, what a great play.
So that's going to come into play. It's going to give all the creatures -1/-1, and that is going to do it.
Incredible.
Neal Oliver
Wow.
defeats Wallace Freeman 2-1. You see Freeman show him the 2 pieces to the combo to deal infinite damage, but that ooze was in the way, and the Grand Prix Las Vegas champion moves on to 3-0.
So a lot just happened there, but just to fill everybody in, obviously the Orzhov Pontiff kills the Birds of Paradise. There's no blocker left, but the Scavenging Ooze lets Freeman gain 1 life. However, Oliver has exactly enough mana to activate the Township to get in there for 4 in the air with his Bird of Paradise.
And that'll be Xaxes.
What a crazy end to a crazy